So having scanned your infrastructure and generated your reports, what's next? Now it's time for you to review the results of your assessments, right? Let's let the data work for us. In most major vulnerability assessment software packages, vulnerabilities will be ranked according to some value determined by the vendor, right? Your first set of assessments are expected to be full of potentially serious items. You should just expect that. The top-down approach is used most of the time where the most severe vulnerabilities are addressed first, with serious, high, and medium following after, obviously.
Now, a well-developed and designed remediation plan will add value while reducing risks and vulnerabilities. You must base the plan's implementation process on facts. Ideally, you should use an ROI approach similar to any other business activity. The remediation team must be a dedicated core team with the support of subject matter experts from both the business and technology areas in order to really be successful.
Right, and remediation is a business activity, right? So let me explain what remediation really is. It's defined as the process of correcting a fault or deficiency, making something better, right? Fixing something. In simple words, vulnerability remediation is the process of fixing vulnerabilities.
Right.
Now, you may not have enough resources to fix them all, so pick the issues you want to fix, and for every vulnerability, there are 3 choices for remediation. You will fix it by eliminating vulnerability altogether.
Correct.
You may accept it because the cost of fixing outweighs the risk. You may mitigate the issue and don't outright fix, but you use additional layers of security to lessen the risk presented by the vulnerability. The business activities are the drivers, as the business owns the risk and the vulnerabilities. Functional business areas determine where they want to be within the acceptable risk range. The remediation tools, devices, and processes are designed, tested, and implemented as remediation activities in support of root cause findings. These remediation activities are deployed to meet the risk model requirements developed and documented by the business. That's why it's a business process.
You know, if you want to avoid information overload, then you're going to have to filter your initial assessment reports for the highest vulnerabilities, because you're going to get a lot of information. Now, they could be the ones which exist in the most in your environment, or those your team deems are the highest risk to your company. Now, you should schedule monthly or bi-monthly meetings with the groups responsible for patching and remediation, and then review the assessment reports to quickly reduce the risk in your business. Now, there may be some vulnerabilities and configuration changes which need explanation and reasons why the effort to mitigate them is valuable. So you have to familiarize your team with the reported vulnerabilities and then understand how they can impact your environment. Patching and configuration steps are a very vital step in defense in-depth strategy for your company.
Right, and remediation work is a complex environment, which should be fully supported and held accountable by senior management for its successes and failures. This should be a top-to-bottom exercise for everybody. You have to remember that remediation activities may have failures, and this must be articulated in the beginning. Set your expectations. If there is a greater potential for failure, you should involve higher-ups in the organization and the ownership of the task or set of tasks to move them. They don't like to be blindsided.
No, they don't.
This will help for proper understanding of the risks, support to remediate, and accountability to manage. Management of vulnerabilities and remediation is very important, obviously, to keep the network operating securely and efficiently. Vulnerability assessment and remediation is not a one-time process. Make it part of your culture. It's going to happen all the time.
Absolutely. You should regularly schedule vulnerability assessments and remediations. This should be consistently performed and should be managed to produce any level of success in your organization.
Okay, so the assumptions you can make now are listed right here. You have conducted the assessments, number 1, and have developed a grouping structure that models the business and is common in size and impact.
That's right.
All right, number 2, at this stage, you will be able to develop the fully loaded risk factor. Then number 3, the fully loaded risk factor by point of reference is the value generated by multiplying criticality times vulnerability times complexity value. Number 4, all values must be part of the assessment collection activity or defined as an assumption in the assessment activities. High-risk vulnerabilities should be evaluated, obviously, and a remediation plan should then be developed. The plan should include these things: whether to fix, mitigate, or accept vulnerabilities, whether to use automatic or manual remediation, strategy to mitigate any remaining vulnerabilities that pop up. Justification for accepting any vulnerability as well needs to be considered.
That's great. Yep, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the mediation process.
Okay.
The time which elapsed between the assessments and the commencement of remediation are critical to addressing root causes. These activities must occur in near time, and any attempt to remediate based on the assessment findings after significant change would be of questionable value. As long as no significant change that has occurred in the architecture, process, and business activities over a time lapse of 6 to 8 months, then it's reasonable to commence remediation. A time lapse of 15 to 24 months for the planning of remediation is really not correct. That's not going to be advisable. A new set of assessments should be conducted to gain a current picture of the state of information and asset protection. Now, the old assessment could be used as a baseline to gauge the amount of change that occurred within that new time frame.
Right, and it's all about reducing the time to remediation. And you do that through seamless integration with development environments which your teams already use. Accelerate remediation by providing in-depth guidance on how to remediate each of the discovered security vulnerabilities. Now, this is important. You should track all remediation activities to completion through a shared workspace. You should test remediation on a device instance before implementing on a production system. You should verify that vulnerabilities have been successfully remediated.
Absolutely.
Always look back, always check your work. Cooperation is required for successful remediation. This seems very manual and requires that general software vendors cooperate. The big players might have put vulnerability and patch information on their site, but not everybody will, and they won't check it. So you need to. Checking a variety of sources would be an equivalent option.
And don't forget about change management. Right? Fixing vulnerabilities may not be fully automatic, but it may be automated with the help of an expert. You have to look for tools which are capable of easily integrating with your ticketing and change management systems. Then that which is able to automate the fix, right? So your report should address the rest of the vulnerabilities discovered after you push for remediation of severe items. Monthly reviews of vulnerability testing reports with the patching and remediation teams will be an important task to your program.